What is a hero? A mythological figure, often of divine descent, endowed with great strength or ability? An illustrious warrior? No. It's a person admired for achievements and noble qualities, one who shows great courage. Welcome to the What's a Hero podcast, where we dive deep into what a hero is and what makes them that hero. I'm your host, Ken Frownfelter, and I'm going to be introducing you to some of the world's most likely and unlikely heroes. You may have never heard of them before, and they most likely have never met you, but they all have one thing in common. They are ready to do whatever it takes to help make you better, even if it means sacrificing everything for you. Let's get into it.
Welcome to another episode of the What's a Hero podcast. I'm Ken Frownfelter. This is episode 10 and somewhat of a milestone episode. They say a lot of podcasts fizzle after episode 7, and we've made it to episode 10, so that's a huge thank you to you guys. Maybe it's just my thick-headedness kind of going forward and not paying attention to what's going on, just doing what I want. Hopefully not. Hopefully I'm doing something that's actually beneficial to other people. But let me share a little of the analytics for you so far. Of this podcast, there are 42 downloads in the last 7 days, 272 in the last 30 days, and 353 total since we've started this. This is all thanks to you out there who are listening. I have no idea who some of you are, but would love to know. And here is all the cities that people are listening from. I've got. Let's start here at the Alhambra, Arizona, Dexter, Oregon, Happy Valley, Oregon, Herndon, Virginia, Lapine, Oregon, Moscow, Russia, Saint Jose ten Nude, Brussels. I couldn't say it. I'm not French, so excuse me. Burbank, California. Eichach, Bavaria, Westboro, Missouri, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Kensington, New York, Rock Springs, Wyoming, Tigard, Oregon, Lake Stevens, Washington, Etobicoke, Ontario, Willits, California, McMinnville, Oregon, Newberg, Oregon, Oregon City, Oregon, Tualatin, Oregon, Carlsbad, California, Anchorage, Alaska, Beaverton, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, Calumet, Washington, Imperial, California, Wilsonville, Oregon, North Miami, Florida, Rock River Falls, Wisconsin, Flagami, Florida, West New York, New Jersey, Kaiserslautern, Rhineland-Pfalz in Germany, Pendleton, Oregon, South Yuba City, California, Bakersfield, California, Chicago, Illinois, Shaw, Washington, Eugene, Oregon, Clichy-Île-de-France, I think that's around Paris, I'm not quite sure, San Francisco, California, Roseburg, Oregon, Salem, Oregon, Westlake, Stevens, Washington, Flatbush, New York, Medford, Oregon, and Grants Pass, Oregon. That is a huge, huge area in which we're covering, and I thank you guys so much for listening, and that is that. So I'm tying my tongue up trying to say thank you, but bottom line is, from me to you, thank you. That is great. I post a little blurb about each episode and on the What's a Hero podcast Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook pages, and I would like to encourage you guys to comment on that. You can join the conversation on whatever podcast episode and chime in, put your 2 cents in, ask questions, or even just say hi. Let me know what you like or didn't like. It's all good. You can also leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast from, provided they offer the ability to leave a comment, obviously. And basically, it helps me and others know about the podcast. It brings it up in the search engines, and when people start looking for a good podcast to listen to. So if you were somebody that's looking for a podcast to listen to, which, some people just looking for one to listen to, a new one to pick up on or whatever, because sometimes podcasts just stop, they ended after however long. People start looking for a new one, or they're looking for one that, might match what they're looking for. And some people are looking for this, and those of you that listen to this podcast understand that. So I thank you for it, and any kind of review you guys give is fantastic. So I hate to say the negative ones also, but I guess even the negative ones, it helps people understand what we need to do and how I need to maybe adjust it. If something's not good, or maybe my editing's not good or whatever, let me know. But getting to today's podcast, today's episode, I have a friend of mine who has I guess I've known for darn near 14 years. And every time I see this person, they're always just positive. They're encouraging. They have a smile on their face, and they always want to do the right thing for other people. They're not a police officer. They're not a firefighter. They are not a nurse or a teacher or a doctor. They're not a vet, as in a veteran. They're not an animal doctor either, but you guys know what I'm talking about. But this person, they work alongside every single one of those people in a support role. And the way that this person goes in, they hit things that are going to benefit the person who they're helping in the long run. It helps them just kind of maintain how they're able to continue doing what they're doing. And they do it for no other reason than the bigness of their own heart. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Pastor Steve Berman to our show, who is he is a law enforcement, firefighter, I guess first responder chaplain, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
How you doing, Steve?
I'm doing well, thank you, Ken. Good to be here.
Well, thank you for coming, and I'm glad that we can get you on. And I actually had somebody brought this up to me and said, "Hey, why don't you interview him? He'd be fantastic for the show." And when I brought it up to you, you're like, "What would I talk about? I've listened to everybody else, and those are real heroes, and I don't have anything to add like they do." But I would beg to differ on that one, and a lot of people that bring it up when I say, "Oh yeah, Steve's coming on the show," and they're like, "Oh wow, that's fantastic." So,
well, yeah, I think we met in the hallway, and I'd said something about planning my own funeral. I'm getting up in years, so you said, "Oh great, let's do this show." And but anyway, I know I work among heroes, all of those that you mentioned, and I feel very privileged to be part of the family. I really do. It was a great day, almost 24 years ago when I became a chaplain.
Yeah. Back
then I didn't know what a chaplain was, and I don't think the department did, but we kind of put it together, and it took a little while, but we finally saw things begin to develop, and a real change took place as we were moving forward. So
that's pretty cool. So were you kind of the developer? I mean,
I was the first chaplain. There were two chaplains.
You said 25 years ago, so you're looking
at
it.
Yeah, 24 almost. Yeah, August of '97 is when I got on. I jumped through the hoops.
Right.
The reason I became a chaplain, first of all, I had law enforcement in my church, and I had sworn officers, and that made me feel good. I always had my back covered.
Right.
And but one day, and one of the officers had given me a scanner for my birthday, and so I was pretty intrigued with listening to calls at times. So one day I heard a call go out from the department looking for a chaplain because there was a man threatening to commit suicide, and he wanted to talk to a chaplain. Well, they called for a chaplain, and no chaplain responded, which was the problem.
Right.
There were chaplains there, but I only met one of them, never saw the other one, and it just seemed like it was absentee, not available.
Right.
And so I called the department, called downtown, and I said, "I'm a pastor. I'm not a chaplain, but I would love to go and be of help if I could." And they said, "Well, we really appreciate you calling, but if you're going to, be involved in things like this, you really need to jump through the hoops."
Right.
That our department, calls for. So I got a hold of my. He was actually chairman of my board at the time, and he was also a sergeant on the force. So he got me hooked up to the right people, and I passed, my background check, and then it started. And really, they didn't know where to send me, and I didn't know where to go. I finally went to a class a couple of months later, and it was a good class, but I didn't realize there was a system. There was a core group of things that a chaplain really needs to know.
Right.
And so there was a certain systematic, and I didn't realize that. We were at the time with ICPC, International Conference of Police Chaplains, and so they had this basic program, and you took, there were 12 basic lessons. And, of course, it took me probably 8 years before I realized. I took all the classes not knowing at the time, in the beginning, especially the first couple of years. Excuse me. I just didn't realize I was taking some classes that seemed interesting. I went to different places, Lodi, California. I went to up north Oregon, and I was taking some classes, but I didn't really put together. There was no cohesiveness to it, and so. So anyway, but little by little, the light turned on. And the bottom line is this. It doesn't matter how many classes you take. If you don't have integrity, if you don't really care, if it's all about you, then you'll never make a good chaplain. I know chaplains that have tons of classes and hours and accolades and so forth, and it's really about them more than the department.
Oh, really?
And so, I didn't want. I knew that there was a negative tone in the department as far as chaplains go because it's just they were not available. It seemed like, and I did not want that to be said of me.
So you wanted to change the I guess the map.
If I was going to be a chaplain, I wanted to be the right kind of chaplain.
Right. Well, that's awesome. Let's go back though, and like I do with everybody, who was little Stevie?
Yeah.
And why did he become what he became?
Well, I was blessed to grow up in a fantastic home. My dad and mom were wonderful, caring parents. My dad was a real man, but a very kind and loving man. He was very. I was listening to a program on the way here this morning, and they were talking about being raised without a father, and I was just so thankful for my dad because he was an amazing man, very much a man of integrity and hard work, and my mom was amazing. She was smart as a whip, made straight A's. Well, she only went to U of W 1 year, and then she got married, but she was studying chemistry and made A's, and so she wasn't a lightweight. She was very smart and a wonderful woman. We always say you are May Berman's kids, so straighten up, act right, do your job, And
you got somebody else's name on it. That's not yours. You don't have your own identity yet. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, we grew up. My dad was a milkman for 30 plus years. And my mom began to work after we were a little older. But we thought we were abused kids because we had to work. We kind of moved to a small 2-acre, had a barn and so forth, and so we had work to do. And we worked, but we played, and we just grew up in a wonderful home, and not a perfect home, but a good home, wonderful home, and a lot of fun. And
like I ask everybody else, you didn't spend a lot of time inside either.
No, never. Right. And it was, and in the area we lived, there was a lot of hadn't built up, and so there was a lot of woods, and man, we were out with our BB guns, and we were playing ball, or we were doing whatever. Right. But we were out and about. I listened to one of the podcasts. They talked about, did you ever play cops and robbers? We did. Yeah. We went down, and so I remember this, especially in the 5th, 6th grade. We had these cap guns that had carried 6 shots. I mean, they were the real deal, 6 shots, you're out. So we'd go down to the school and play around the portable buildings and everything and go shooting each other, And in fact, one of the coolest guns I ever got was given to me by an uncle. And it actually carried bullets. And you took the bullets apart, put the cap in it, put the bullet back in the gun. Oh. I have never seen anything like it since. But so that...
now that would be a
Oh, yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, no, we wouldn't even go there.
Yeah.
But we did a lot of those fun things around. And back in those days, by the way, we got on the city bus with our 22s, took the bolt out, went to our shooting classes at the school, and but that's the dark ages. That's back in the 50s.
You got to have HUD classes now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you spend all that time just playing and going and doing and being May Berman's son.
Yep.
And you had multiple siblings?
Yes. So I'm the oldest, and then my brother, Doug, is 3 years younger than I, and then my sister is 3 years younger than Doug, and so we're 3 years apart. I'm the old guy, and so I always say my brother got the brains, and he was cool, and my sister got the looks, and she's beautiful and a wonderful gal. And
you got everything left over?
I got stuck with being the first guy, so yeah. But we had a wonderful upbringing. We did a lot of camping too, by the way.
Yeah. And
my brother is not an outdoor guy. I love the outdoors. I love to be in the woods. And my dad was a fisherman, and
right.
he liked salt water, and so we did a lot of that. He didn't take me hunting too much, but that developed a little later on. But
that was like mine. We didn't. My dad, I think he took me hunting once, but we did a ton of fishing. I mean, deep sea and just right. all that. It didn't matter, streams or rivers. If there was body water and there was a fish in it, we probably fished it when I was a kid.
Yeah.
There's tons of it, to the point where I'm like, oh my gosh, and guess what we're doing this weekend? You're fishing? Yeah, guaranteed. And I would get to the point. Now I look back fondly on it. Back then, as a kid, because it was all the time. And especially going out in the ocean. That was
We camped probably every other weekend when the weather was decent, and we hadn't been going to church when I was real little. My mom sent my brother and I to church when I was 6. He was 3, and so we walked 6 blocks to Sunday school. But we did a lot of camping and on the weekends. And one year when I was 16, we took off 40 days and 40 nights in a tent. And went from La Push, Washington, all the way down into Mexico, back up through the Grand Canyon, through Yellowstone, and that was an amazing.
That's pretty cool. How old were you then?
16.
16.
So
well, that's perfect. That brings us right to the whole childhood. You're just doing stuff outside. You're being a kid, and you're learning and doing all the things. Then you start getting into high school, and you start going through the whole. I figure what I'm going to do, and where you start.
I didn't know what I was going to do. In fact, in my world, I was thinking I wanted to be a forest ranger. Yeah. Pastoring was the furthest thing from my mind. So, like I said, none of our family, my dad mom were wonderful, but we weren't Christians at the time. And so they started sending me and Doug to Sunday school. By the way, my brother was a member of that church for the next 63 years. So, quite a history there. But, sure. So anyway, we started coming home talking about the things of the Lord, and my mom got curious, saying, I guess I better go find out what's going on. And of course, then she became a Christian, trusted the Lord. And then my dad, who worked Sundays, got the day off, and so it wasn't long before he was going to church, and then he trusted the Lord too. And so we were on our way. But still, when you come to high school, I had wonderful Christian friends. We had a great high school youth group. I mean, there were some fabulous Christians. I was involved, but I wasn't a leader. And right. High school was amazing as far as Christianity. We just Youth for Christ. We would meet on Saturdays. Seemed like it was a Presbyterian church, and there might be 800 kids down there, and on a Saturday night. Wow. So high school. But as far as knowing what I was going to do, I just had this feeling I needed to go to a Christian college, but it wasn't because I was so dedicated. I mean, I was a good kid, but as one guy put it, Steve, you're a good guy, you're just not good for much. And so, because it just didn't seem like I had any direction or focus or whatever. Yeah. Right? And so, I a friend of mine was a Baptist. I didn't grow up a Baptist. I'm a Baptist pastor. I never emphasize that too much, but I am. I'm not ashamed to be a Baptist, but I wasn't at the time. But a friend of mine, he had an evangelist come, and he talked about the college in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So in my senior year, I thought, they said, we're going to Chattanooga to check out this college. You want to go with? And I said, yeah.
Yeah, you go to Tennessee. Yeah.
Yeah.
Get a chance to get
and
out.
so and that was before freeways. And so we drove 72 hours nonstop from Tacoma to Chattanooga.
Wow.
And then when I got there, I was shocked out of my mind, because here I grew up in a church running 100, maybe.
Right.
Walked in a place that seated 4,000.
Jeez.
And it was filled on a Wednesday night. Every seat filled on a Wednesday night.
Wow.
And I'd never seen anything like it. So it was pretty exciting. It was about to change my life, but it was. So when I left to go to that college,
right,
I was on an adventure, and I was going away from home, and that was exciting to me. And not that I was trying to get away from home, but I just thought, man, it's a great adventure. It wasn't because I was really so spiritually inclined that I couldn't wait to get there and start studying and learning more things about the Lord. I was a Christian. I was glad I was a Christian. I hung out with Christians. But as far as really coming to a point in my life where I was going to be a real disciple, I hadn't come to that place yet.
Right.
So,
right.
yeah.
So you graduate high school, and
Yep.
you go to Tennessee, and you go to Christian Bible College or whatever,
Yeah.
right? And you're there, and you spent all 4 years, get your degree, and you said, "Hey, I'm good now. I'm going to go be something more, something changed,
yeah.
something different."
So
happened.
first of all, I wasn't there 4 years. I was there 8 years, because during that time I became very rebellious.
Okay.
I started hearing things. Really what it was a challenge for being a real disciple, but some of the things that were said just kind of blew me off, and I said, that is the craziest thing I've ever heard. Well, instead of investigating and finding out, from the scripture and whatever, I just got rebellious. Now, I never did anything bad, as far as I never drank, didn't chew, didn't go with girls who did,
Right.
But anyway.
You go with a girl who chews?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, whatever.
Yeah.
If you like that dark smile, that's fine.
But so anyway, I got rebellious, quietly so, and I just said, I'm going to do my own thing. But it affected
Right.
everything else I did. So my grades weren't, it was a situation where there was a college, but there was also a Bible school and a seminary. So I wound up in the Bible school. And I mean, I liked a lot of the teachers. Some of them became my dear friends later on. But for about 3 years, I was running from God, and that's pretty tough, because you go to chapel every day.
Yeah,
and
Bible college,
yeah.
you're running from. Yeah,
yeah, I'm running from God in Bible college, and things get worse. I almost joined the Air Force trying to get away, and passed all my tests, and they said, we want you, but I didn't. But
right.
So in the middle of this, one day, standing on the corner, literally standing on the corner, my foot up against a telephone pole with a buddy of mine, my future wife walked by, and she's from Texas, and she said, "Hi, y'all." And that did it. I said, "Who in the world?" I said, "Who is that gorgeous gal there from?" And with that drawl. So anyway, I was hooked, and she is the best thing that ever happened to me outside the Lord. And she's an amazing woman. We've been married. We'll be 57 years this coming July.
Yeah. And so that changed your trajectory, though.
Well,
right? Or shaped it?
Yeah. So what happened was we started dating, and I was still rebellious, and so not outwardly. I mean, I don't know that you'd walk up to me and said, "Well, what's wrong with him?" But if you knew me, and so a little later, different things happened. But a little later, she met me in the middle of the street one day, high noon, and with all my worldly goods that I had given her,
Right.
You know, my cowboy hat and all these good things.
Sure.
And she said, I'm done. And she said, you and I are not going the same direction. And that was like getting sucker punched in the stomach.
Yeah.
I said, I am a fool. You know, I'm really messing up here. But it didn't go away right away, you know. But there was a moment, though, I don't know, months later, maybe a year later, I try to think of the timeline. But anyway, the Lord was really working on me, and finally I just broke.
Yeah.
And I just said, Lord, I surrender. I am not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to fight you, and I'm not going to be this arrogant, hot-headed, you know, on the inside anyway,
sure.
person. I surrender. And it just changed everything, just overnight. In fact, in 30 seconds, I was a different person.
Wow.
It was like getting saved again. You know?
Was it at that time in the middle of the street with her? Or did
That was later on. That was later on,
in?
several months down the road. Uh-huh. And, of course, then I had to go back and say, will you take me back? Well, she's tough.
Yeah.
She's a sweetheart. I mean.
So you had to jump through hoops with her as well,
I did.
Huh?
Yes,
yeah.
I did. And and so finally, you know, we got back together. And, of course, we were engaged in 1963 in December and then got married in July of 64.
Nice.
And what is so amazing is she is such a caring, giving person. It's always about others, and she has always been in my corner, like being a chaplain to the church that I pastored, and my wife always were very gung-ho about me being a chaplain.
Yeah.
That's not always the case.
About being a first responders chaplain.
Yeah. So a lot of churches don't want their pastor, they don't want to share him. And my church was different. And I say my church. But, and
church
then.
You went to, I guess, right? Yeah.
So anyway, then we started, after we got married, we started going to a little church. And that church, God used that church and that ministry to really challenge me. And I remember it as if it was yesterday. There was a day sitting in the pew. I just said, Lord, I'm going to be a pastor. You want me to be one? I'm going to be one. And so that was the beginning, you know. And then I graduated. Like I said, I crammed 4 years into 8, so I finally got out of school. And her brother was just starting a church, and he asked me to be his assistant. And so I went to Dallas, and I was there 2 different times. First time I was there 7 years. I always wanted to go to Washington and start a church.
Because that's where you were from, right?
Yeah, Tacoma. I was born in Snowqual and raised in Tacoma. So that's what I want to do. But I was in Texas for 7 years, and that was a tremendous learning experience for me in some areas, especially working with people.
Right.
Because he was, I don't know how much of this to say, but he was a character before he got saved, and he was.
He lived life.
He lived
good, bad,
life.
Or otherwise.
I could tell you stories you'd say, really? And he became an amazing. When he got saved, people couldn't believe it. I've had gangster funerals with him. That's all I'll say.
Wow.
Where the gangsters, and I mean gangsters, lined up at the front. I'm thinking of this one service, and the police lined up at the back. Wow. I'm telling you, and he just loved every minute of it because he was getting the chance to preach the gospel to everybody,
all sides.
And so, and he was quite an orator. He was God had really gifted him, and but what he taught me, what I was going to say is this: like when we went to the hospital, we never left the hospital. If we went to the hospital and somebody was having surgery,
right,
we never left till the surgery was done. And I thought, okay. He said, what happens if this person dies in surgery and we're not here?
Right.
And the loved one is here? Well, that always stuck with me.
Sure.
So at our church here, you know, we'd show up at the hospital and they might be literally 20 people from our church sitting in the, you know, having a party, waiting on surgery to be done. But I just I just never forgot that and never wanted to leave somebody alone. Well, that when I became a chaplain, I found out that that really played into my thinking.
Yeah,
and,
I have I guess a similar thing. There was a friend of mine. He was going through super rough time. I mean, to the point where he was contemplating suicide and all this different stuff. And he got picked up. The police had to pick him up, take him on a mental hold, and the whole thing. And we went over and visited with his mom, and she was just beside herself, didn't know what's going on because she had just gone through a divorce and all this stuff. So she was pretty much alone. And she was just talking to the group of us, and she's just like, I've been trying to call my pastor. I've been trying to call, all these different people from her church, and they were not answering the phone. She goes, where is my pastor? And, this isn't to talk bad about the pastor or anything like that. It's that person that needs that person.
Yep.
When they need them. Whether they're doing anything or not, just being there makes the difference. She had all these other people around. She expected her pastor to be there.
Right.
So you're right. What's that person? What's that family? They need that guidance. That if that's where they're at, that's what they need.
I remember this. I remember the first death notification. I became a chaplain in 97, so I came to the church in 90, February 90, and very small. We were running about 30, and so really it was just the bare beginnings. I mean, it had been in existence, but it was just kind of dying on the vine. So by 97, though, the church was doing well, and in fact, our missions program was for a small church. I mean, we did run a couple of hundred after a few years, and but our mission giving was over $100,000 a year for 10 years. I mean, it was it was amazing for a church that couldn't afford to pay the pastor when they first came. But in 97, when I became a chaplain and I was looking for these classes, I'd finally gone to a class that dealt with death notifications. Well, in 99, I had my first one. And and it was on a Wednesday night, and I was getting ready to preach. It was 6:30, and I had to be there at 7, and this is my first call out. I said, I am not doing this. So I called my assistant. I said, do you remember what I said about always being prepared, ready to go? I said, I hope you are, because you got it at 7. I'm gone.
I've got something else to do.
Yeah. And I'm still good friends with that family, but it was a horrendous thing. And a thing that really got me was they had a family kind of like mine. They had a son who was 31. He was the one who had died, and I had a son at the time who was 31, and a daughter, and it was kind of spaced like our family. Uh-huh. But when I walked up with the two deputies, she knew something was up, and of course then I told her what had happened. Her son had been killed in a car accident, and she just collapsed in my arms, and so we stayed there, and then I said, can I call your pastor? And she said, please do. And so she did. And then we were in, and of course, as chaplains, you try to find out as much information as you can before you go on scene. And what they didn't tell us was this son that was killed had been married for a year, and the anniversary was that week. And he had a wife, and we didn't know he had a wife.
Wow.
So we went and picked up Grandma, and then we went, and when we got to the house, it was pretty chaotic because she had seen a picture on television of the accident and knew it was her husband's truck. And so she knew before we got there.
Oh, boy.
So, but the point I was trying to make is the pastor came, and he stayed for about 25 minutes, and then he went home. Well, man, they were... they
weren't done. They weren't done after 25 minutes. No.
So I stayed till midnight, and because they were bringing the body back, and they were crushed. They were brokenhearted. This was a tight family. They just loved each other, and they're just. And a lot of times there's not a whole lot you can say, but just being there.
Right.
And of course, we did hit it off, and I'm still good friends with a son who lives in the area, and met the mom the other day, and we talked for a bit. And but you just have to be prepared to spend time. I mean, I've spent hours waiting by the river while they look for a body, and because people are broken.
Right. Well, and we may have mentioned this previously, but that's what you do when there's stuff and you're that person that's there to support somebody. That's why you're doing it, because you have that, either your skin's thick enough or you're at that point, your cup's full enough that you can spare sharing whatever it is that you've got to give to those people, There's a thing with, when I was on the SWAT team, that we would, before everything we'd go out, they would say, "You good?" Well, yeah, am I good? The bottom line questioning that they're asking is, how's life at home? How everything good between you and your wife? Everything good between, everything all right? You got, are you squared up in your head so you can focus on this? If you say yes, you are, cool. We know that you can go do this. And it could be prolonged. Who knows how long it's going to be? It's got to be similar. Obviously, you're not going to go out and you're not going to lay siege or you're not going to be a prolonged amount of time trying to maintain and getting the crime or whatever like that. But what I'm saying is you're actually working on getting the person to a point where they're not alone.
Absolutely.
And that they know that they have a reason to keep going. And because how many people, a close family member passes away, and then all of a sudden they're like, well, what is this life good for without that person in this?
Right.
Well, that's just it. There, and you are there, you're showing them, you're that one that is showing them because you have that ability, you're set up.
And a lot of times what you'll do, I've done this in the past, is you're talking to somebody whose husband, say, just died, and so you talk about him as if the husband is still living, and you say, what did you and Bob like to do? What did you and boy, they start talking about it, start remembering all these good things, and it just takes their mind away from the acuteness of the grief that they're suffering, and they start reliving some things. But I will tell you this: preachers are bad about this, and I'm probably I'm slow a learner, but we like to fix things, and so we're more prone to, you go to somebody's house. I'm thinking about a parishioner, and you sit down, and they got problems, and you're waiting so you can tell them the 5 things that'll fix the problem.
Right.
It's just not the way it works.
There's no check boxes.
No, it's not. A chaplain has got to learn to be a listener, which means you settle back and you really listen.
Right.
And you have to be a good forgetter, too, because if we're talking with police officers and they are confiding in you, you want to make sure they know, hey,
this isn't going anywhere.
Yeah, this is not going anywhere.
Right.
In fact, what an officer tells me never gets to the chief, and what the chief tells me never gets to the officer. It's just the way it is.
Sure, yeah.
And
thinking on those lines, what you were saying, that you just need to listen, or you need to focus on the positive stuff. I remember when I was a kid, my grandfather passed away, and this was the first time I remember somebody close to me ever passing away, and it was just weird. I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know. But I was, sad, and then how are you supposed to act? You don't know what you're supposed to do. And I noticed that my mom, my aunt, my grandma, my uncle, other family members, they were all in the kitchen at my grandma's house. And I'm over kind of in the living room, just kind of, playing with my toys or whatever, and looking at the ground or doing whatever, being upset. But hearing them in there telling stories and laughing. The evening that he passed away.
Absolutely.
Because I'm like, oh, we can be happy now? Is that that's how it works.
Yeah.
Okay. We're talking about the positivity that he provided in this world. So that always stuck with me, that you focus on those positive things. You focus on the good stuff in life, and not the woe is me.
Yeah.
Don't be a victim. But what did that person leave in their life for you to be able to enjoy?
Yeah. One of the things, too, and this is true, police officers are not real good about talking about just opening up. They don't share a lot of things. And one of the things we've done, I'm a member of 2 CERT teams, critical incident response teams, where we deal with, traumatic incidents and so forth, just to make sure that everybody's doing all right. But one of the things we do is just get everybody to talk and share, and it goes from facts to thoughts to reactions, and sometimes it gets pretty personal, but again, it's very confidential. But it really helps. Guys have walked away saying, "Oh, I'm glad we found all that out. I'm glad we shared the things that we did."
Right. Because
if you don't, things accumulate, and you have these incidents that in your life, and it may not be the one incident that you're on that gets you. It might be the one that was 5 years ago.
Yeah. You just never dealt with it.
Yeah.
It's still raw. Yeah.
In fact, the very first class I ever went to was a police officer, 27 years, who almost committed suicide after 5 years. And he put the gun in his mouth, and he said, "I'm going to make a mess in the wall." And he turned around and saw his family.
Oh, wow.
He said, "Well, I better do something." So that was back in the dark ages. We're talking 70s. And back then, so the chief says, "Get down here. What's the matter with you?" And of course, and he did research and Vietnam and all of that. And then he started looking at his life, and he'd had 5 really acute incidents pretty close together, and nobody ever did anything about it. Nobody ever talked about it. He just went back on the job.
Right.
And after a while, it just triggered, this mental oppression and emotional. He just couldn't handle it.
Right. There's one of our lieutenants tells a story about how there was a guy that he used to work with that he got into a shooting one day, and he worked for a neighboring department, but he lived in the city in which the lieutenant worked. And so he was just on patrol, and they found that the guy that got in the shooting, he was walking home after work, and just walking home. And he worked, and he lived 3 or 4 miles from where the office was. And he said, What are you doing?" He goes, "I'm just walking home." "You were in a shooting today?" "Yeah." And it's like, I don't know if weather was bad or not. He goes, I just want to get home. I'm just hungry. I want a sandwich. Nobody had done anything to help this guy get through this. They were just like, "Hey, you got in that. Hey, we'll be doing the investigation. Don't worry about it." What else? That's nothing. Go on. Get. That sort of idea.
Yeah.
And you can't do that.
No.
You can't just kick
can't.
him out.
Nobody is designed. I don't know if that's the right word. Nobody is. We're human beings. Nobody was ever created to see the stuff that you guys see, and firefighters and paramedics. Goodness, I don't know how they do their job, but they just see stuff every day, and it's graphic. I remember I was in a shooting, and in fact, the sergeant that got me to become a chaplain, we were following. We were going up to the north end of a town, and we were going to break up a crowd of kids. And just as we got to the north end of the town, a car was driving slow, and all of a sudden you could see a flash. It was night, and I was riding with the officer at the time.
Like ride along passenger seat and all that?
Yes. Yeah. And I've been trying to go home, but it was one of those days. It was so busy. It was so chaotic. I never got a chance to get out of the car.
Yeah.
So I was there from early morning till 1 in the morning, and early in the morning, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And so this guy took a shot and fired over the kids' heads, and then he drove onto the freeway, and we followed him, and we were right behind him. And long story short, he made a stop. The thing about it is he wasn't a bad person. He had been fired. He went and got drunk, and he just, other than that, he never had trouble with the law at all.
Yeah, just snapped a little bit.
Yeah, and he did. And so we pulled up behind him, and it was just us, 1 in the morning. We had him lit up. They had reconfigured the car, so I wasn't able to get the rifle, which I'm glad that was the Lord in that. And so I just went and got behind the car. But he shot himself, and of course I saw that. And by the way, that was when I really became part of the family, because then the officers were coming around. "You all right, chaplain?"
Yeah.
And how you doing? And so that became it was a bad thing. And I saw that. I thought, these guys see stuff like this a lot, and accidents and crashes and what have you. But sometimes these horrific things, and I know how it affected me.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
in fact, I didn't realize it, but I was angry that he made us watch him do this, and he never gave us a chance to help him because I felt like we could have helped him. But,
right.
Yeah.
Let's go back. So you're talking about your assistant pastor at your brother-in-law's church.
Yep.
And that's down in Texas.
Yeah. And then I went to Washington State, and I started a church. And that was an amazing time. We had no money. We had some churches supported us about $400 a month. That was in the 60s. No, actually, it was 74. We moved there in 74. And we moved to a town and started a church, and you just out knocking on doors. Well, I had to support a family, so I worked in a foundry. When I left college, I had worked in a foundry. I said, never again will I ever work in a foundry. I was a grinder. And it's just the hard. I don't believe in purgatory, but that was close. And
because you're by yourself, but it's just difficult.
It's just you're grinding the welds off, not welds, but where they've cut the iron. Yeah. So you're grinding things, and you're getting burned, and you come home just black. And so I went to work at 5 a.m, got off at 1:30. And came home, got a shower, changed clothes, and went out, knocked on doors, trying to get people, tell them that we're starting a church. That was a year and a half, and I think we finally got up to about 45 people. And I thought, man, what in the world? But as the Lord would have it, He moved us 50, 60 miles south, and we started. And the people that we had went to another church, except for those that were not really tied down, and they came with us. So we had a handful of people and a couple of couples from another town. And before you know it, we were running 3 or 4 months. It seemed like we were running about 100 people, and so that was good. And but again, I was a young pastor, and I wish I'd had the wisdom that I have. The things that I've learned now, I wish I'd had it then, but it never works that way.
Yeah, so, well, that's just it. And I think I mentioned this, early on. Maybe it was with Jeff. But you got the things that as you're older, you wish you could tie those in with the body that you had when you were younger.
Oh, absolutely.
The superhero that you would be, But that's probably exactly why God does that. So we're dumb and healthy when we're young, but we're smart or wise.
Yeah,
and our bodies are.
I still worked 60 miles away in the foundry.
Oh,
and so I got up, and we wanted our children in a Christian school. Well, we didn't have one. We were just starting a church, and so I would get up at 3:30 in the morning, get my oldest son up, take him to my sister's 30 miles north. Mm-hmm. Drop him off, and then drive another 30 miles.
I'm sure 20. He loved getting up
in
the morning, didn't he?
I just look at that. My wife and I would just shake our heads and said, how dumb could we be? But at the time, that's what we thought we needed to do. So I would drive using all 4 lanes because I was half asleep, getting up to the foundry, and then get off at 1:30 and drive back home, put my other hat on, and try to pastor this church because it was growing. And then we started, and then I was able to quit the foundry and worked local in town. We started a Christian school. And I just told my pastor yesterday, the day before, I said, I don't know what in the world possessed me. Because we were renting buildings for the church, we were renting buildings for the school. The people were really for it. And by the way, we had for a small school, we had very sharp people, and it was amazing, but it was also backbreaking.
Oh, yeah.
So we were able to purchase 8 acres, and we built a building in 1980. But we had problems along the way, and again, if I had had the wisdom that I have now, I might have alleviated some of it. But so about 1986, I needed a break, and they needed a break, I think. And the Lord worked it out. The pastor that took my place is still there.
Yeah.
The churches only had 2 pastors.
Wow.
And the 8 acres so we were on a 2-lane country road. Now it's a 4-lane intersection on both sides. So, and that property is worth a mint. So, and they built a big auditorium, so they're doing well.
Good,
and,
good for them.
So, yeah. And so that was great. I went back to Texas, and I was my brother-in-law's assistant, a little better assistant this time, I think. But I was rethinking ministry, and I was rethinking philosophy of ministry, and why are we doing it this way, and is this the only? Because when I went to college, it was kind of like, this is the way we do it, and
right.
And so, and methods are good, but the Lord doesn't want us to trust methods. He wants us to trust Him, and it's His church, and it's His work, and we're just servants. And I was so gung-ho about, people getting saved, people getting their lives changed, and so I wanted to. What I was doing was I was wearing myself out playing God. I hate to say it. I'm embarrassed to say it.
Yeah.
But I came to a place where I said, you know what? If I'm going to do ministry, God's got to be God. I'll do my part, and I'll let Him do His part, and I'm not going to worry about people. They're coming along at their own pace, and if I preach the Word and try to be an example, and our church here, where I pastored for the last 30 years, it's the most amazing place. I'm telling you, I've never been around a more loving place, and it just was amazing. But I was free. When I came to this church, I said, Lord, I'm here. I'll do whatever you want. And so you showed me, you helped me preach what I'm supposed to preach, be the example I'm supposed to be. And of course, again, I had a wonderful family. By the way, I have 3 children, 6 grandchildren. I have a son who lives in Colorado. I have, and then we live with our daughter and her husband, because I retired 2019, and so not from the chaplaincy, though. I'm still a chaplain.
Yeah, so you're not an active pastor.
No, I'm not.
But you still go to the same church that you used to pastor.
Yeah, and I still teach Sunday school. I stayed away for a while, but Pastor and I are such, and that's really unique too, because he's nothing. So I asked him if he's ever caught a fish. He's never caught a fish.
Right.
And I'm saying, this guy's never caught a fish. You want him to be your pastor? Just kidding him, And he didn't know who Roy Rogers was, and of course, and we kidded about that. But boy, he's a tech guy. He knows stuff, but we are just as close as I just am so thrilled that God brought him, because
and that's kind of a funny thing. I guess there's churches that the pastor, when they leave, they don't want them to stick around, or even some pastors don't want to stick around, right? Because they feel the new one feels threatened, that everybody's going to go to him or all this other stuff, as opposed to the current pastor. And so that is obviously not an issue, huh?
It's not.
The
not
ego
a bit.
thing is gone, huh?
No, in fact, what happened was, before I retired, I knew the day was coming, because, after all, you can't pastor when you're 100.
Right.
They needed a fresh look too, I think. But and it's really hilarious, some of the things. But long story short, I called him and talked his ear off. He didn't say anything, and finally I realized I was doing all the talking. I said, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was monopolizing your time. So I told him we were looking for an assistant who would take over the church.
Right.
Well, long story short, he called me back and said, hey, we're taking a little vacation. You mind if we come down and visit? And so they did. And so we kept talking back and forth, and we just lined up. Now, we're different as night and day in some areas, but our philosophy of ministry is the same.
That's good.
And so we just hit it off, and he was an encouragement. I'm telling you, the last 2 years, he just encouraged me, helped me in such a tremendous way. So, It was great, and then the church voted on him, and so he's the pastor, and they have thanked me over and over, saying, thank you for bringing him, because they love him, and so it's doing good.
That's
but
good.
So he's asked me after a year, he asked me to continue if I would to teach the adult class, so I'm still doing that.
Okay.
But I'm chaplain for 2 departments, and
right. And it's same thing that you've been doing since '97. You said.
Yep.
And so during all it's 2021 now, so you've been going on that shoot longer than you were. At living in some of those places, like you said, in the 80s when you started that school.
Yeah. This is I've been like I said, almost 24 years. I've pastored for 51. So, but. I wanted to continue being a chaplain because I didn't want to just rust out somewhere.
Sure.
But I love doing it so much.
So let me ask you, why? Why do you? Where does the? I mean, I guess through growing up and everybody does it. Why do you love being a chaplain so much?
I don't know of first responders. I don't know of a group of people who need encouragement and help, and sometimes I don't feel like I'm much of an encouragement. That's something else that I learned about presence, but I don't know if anybody who's in a more stressful job and yet, and especially in these days, not appreciated so much. I look at, and I'm part of the family, and I just feel like I felt like I had another congregation, and
right.
So I just didn't want to, as long as I can get around and be an asset and not a liability, I did not want to give up being a chaplain because I'm close to the family. Right. You know, I love being around police officers, firefighters. I got to be honest, I'm probably hang out with the police officers more than the firefighters. But when I started in '97, there, Fred, who's our other chaplain, who now really is the head guy, and he's done so much. He is to make chaplaincy. Now we have 50, 60 chaplains throughout some counties, but when he came on board, because for a while there, I was the guy getting called all the time.
Yeah,
there was only one chaplain.
Yeah.
2:30 in the morning, 3:30 in the morning. It was regular every week. I mean, it just seemed like. But you really get close to people, and boy, some of my best friends were atheists. You know, we became a family, and I didn't want to get rid of the family. You know, I didn't want to leave the family,
right?
And it's different than pastoring, you know, but you're still ministering to people. And I didn't want to lose that, and so I wanted to be. In fact, the church is supporting me a little bit, so I can do that. But kind of like a mission project,
right? That's cool.
But I just now I'm breaking into a new department, and of course it's like starting all over again. They look at you like, okay, who's this guy?
Who's this guy? Why is he asking so many questions?
Yeah. Oh man, I remember the first time I walked in a briefing room. They looked at me like I had 3 eyes, and I thought, oh me. And
so
and
everybody gets quiet, like how you? Because I know there's one guy that calls you Padre.
Yeah.
How you doing, Padre?
Yeah.
I'm not a priest.
Yeah, no, but that's what he called me. And then when Fred came on the scene, he said, I said, hey, we got another Padre. He said, no, you're the Padre. I'll get another name for him. And you know, and then some of the things I've been able to do with the guys, like I love going to the range with them. And I remember the first time it's the only time I ever qualified first time without blowing any shots.
Yeah.
And so the range master said I had fired my rounds, and he said, all right, girls, he said, the chaplain has qualified, let's go. And I felt pretty good about that.
And all the other guys, some of the guys that didn't qualify the first time.
Yeah,
like,
that's right. Yeah. I can think of a couple of them right now. But so anyway, but that's the only time I ever qualified first time. I always blew the first shot left. I don't know why I did, but anyway. So that was a lot of fun getting with the guys.
They say that it's because of jerking the trigger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it was a double action at the time.
Jerking trigger or anticipating the shot.
Yeah, and it was always when I was leaning around the barrel on the right side that I blew that shot. But so anyway, it was that. But that was part of building relationships, and I guess the big thing about chaplaincy is you build relationships.
Yeah,
that's what you do in church. You build relationships. That's just what you do.
I think and we were talking about this on the last podcast with Susie. That's what you do. And we were talking about leadership, and she was talking about that quite a bit. And and that's what I've learned is that's what leadership is as well. Is it building relationships? And I think that's what our life on this planet is. A lot of responsibility that we have is build relationships. Where do we go and being on this planet, God put us on here for other people.
Yeah.
So we got to be there. We got to help those, people in our lives. What are we supposed to do? We're supposed to, we have kids and we grow and we develop people. And so if we're developing people, we have to develop how to relate to those people.
Right.
So that's where relationships come in. And I 100% agree with you that relationships are the number one thing that we need to be focused on before we start looking at all these other things.
The guys used to kid me about he's got his Bible, but he's also packing. But I never do, of course, in the car when I'm riding with you guys. And really that scene where the man committed suicide, that probably I wrote some things where I really felt strong. I didn't want my officer to have to worry about the chaplain who's not a trained police officer holding a gun,
right? And
then worry about the person that he's dealing with too. So chaplains are chaplains. They're wannabe police officers don't make good chaplains. Now
right.
I got to be honest. I've embarrassed myself a couple of times, and especially in the beginning, I was so gung ho, and then. And I wanted them to know, hey, if you get in trouble, I'm here. I'm gonna, and I just should have kept my mouth shut because you're a chaplain, and that's why you're there. And so now I had one officer tell me, he said, now we're here, and this could go dicey, and so if it does, just take off, run. Well, I'm not a hero, but I'm not built that way. I just couldn't do it, and so.
For the running or the hero?
Yeah, the running. I couldn't run away. I just couldn't. Yeah,
physically
yeah, both.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I ran the 116. But I remember way when I was in my 30s, we had pulled up at a gas station in town where we were pastoring, and kids were with me, and they were all young, and this police officer was in a fight with a guy across the street, and I jumped out of my car and ran over there to give him a hand, and I didn't know exactly where to, and all of a sudden the baton came out, and it was flying everywhere, and I think he's got this, so I just backed off a little bit. But I just, my dad was a good boxer. He taught me to box when I was first grader.
Yeah.
And so by the time I was in the sixth grade, I was a pretty good boxer.
Nice.
He told me, he said, if you ever become a bully, it's me and you. He said, don't, but he wanted me to know how. So every fight I ever got into was defending some kid that was being picked on by a bully. I just could not walk away.
Yeah.
And, but the main focus is to be there as a resource. And the difference in chaplaincy is you don't get in the car or come in the station, you don't preach sermons. That's not your bailiwick. You get in somebody's car, it's their domain,
right.
And you're there to be with them. Now, if they ask you, and that comes from earning their respect.
Sure.
So I remember the one time when an officer said, all right, tell me what you believe. And it had been 12 years since we first ridden together, maybe 10. I mean, it was a long time.
Yeah.
And and then, of course, there are a lot of guys that share our belief, and that's good, but you're not there to make converts. That sounds, to some pastors, that's almost, hypocritical, or not hypocritical, but just not, we're supposed to be there converting people. No, that's not what a chaplain does.
Right.
A chaplain, it's about being, really. But what he does is he's there to encourage any way he can, lift the load, help, bring water, do whatever he can do to ease.
So you're showing Jesus, through your actions.
Yeah, you are.
You're not trying to get this person. You need to repent. Blah blah blah.
No.
You're showing what Jesus called you to be.
Yep.
And you're showing this person, hey, this is who Jesus is.
Absolutely.
And if they make the decision and they want to call you up later and say, hey, I want to talk about that more off duty, and that's when you get to do that portion.
Yep.
But while you're there as a chaplain, you're there for.
You have got to earn the respect.
Sure.
And they got to. Unless you're credible, you won't be believable, and you just don't get in. And I know some guys who just didn't get it, and they found themselves out. Literally, one guy, the police officer stopped the car and said, "Get out," and I know the guy, so I mean, yeah. But that's not why we became chaplains. We just. You guys take on such a tremendous load, and the family takes on a load. Wives, I've said to my wife, I leave the house to go to work, and you don't worry about me.
Right.
A cop's wife, a cop leaves the house, and the wife is saying, I hope he gets home, because that's a reality, and it's getting more real all the time, even in a small place. But,
right.
So anyway, but it's amazing what you find yourself doing. There are a lot of incidents that are really tough. Kids, babies dying. And I remember one time we went over on a street, and little baby had died, 14 months old, and the hospital called back and said, I want you to go check in your baby. You should have brought him home as early as you did. And the hospital had sent him home. And so she went back and found the little baby dead, 14 months. Long story short, and of course there were officers there. I didn't see a dry eye. I mean, I think there's 6-7 police officers.
How long ago
there.
was this? You think 2007, 2008?
Yeah.
Was it an apartment complex?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was I was there.
Okay.
That was my case. Well, I was one of the officers on that case.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah.
And that was, oh my gosh, that was, and I honestly, I didn't even realize that you were, but now that I think about it, because there's so many people milling around.
Yeah, there was, I'm thinking about one guy who was there, but I was thinking with the other detective. But here's what, so when I finally went into the house with the detective and we saw the baby, and it was just beautiful and just hard to believe. Well, everybody left, and I stayed, and I sat on the floor playing with the other 2-year-old, or maybe older, 3-year-old. There was another child in the house, and these people were coming and going by the droves, and they were going to the back room, and they were talking and
investigating pictures and doing all that stuff.
Well, no, just the family, the cop. Oh. Everybody had gone.
Oh.
Baby's body's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's, and so, but the family is back and forth, and I'm sitting on the floor playing with this child, and they don't even know I'm there.
Wow.
And finally, I mean, it's later in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Guy walks in and said, "Who are you?" And I told him who I was, and of course, then they had not paid one bit of attention. They were in shock. They were dealing with this. It was very traumatic the way it happened.
Yeah. I remember we showed up with one. I remember the one officer called. He goes, I need a supervisor and a detective. He called that over the radio. He said, I need him now. I was on field training at the time. This was, like I said, years ago. And my field trainer was a supervisor. So we go, and he goes, let's go. So we get over there, and I kind of assisted him with I started making a sketch of the floor plan of the house and all this different stuff. And we got tasked with going and doing the next to kin notification, and just walking out there and seeing the mom wailing. And if you've never heard
I know it.
A mother wail, I don't care the age of the child.
Yeah.
I don't care if the child is 31. I don't care if the child is 16. I don't care if they're 14 months. If you've never heard, the wail is the same, and it's super deep and guttural and comes from their pit that they've just lost something of theirs, and it's so heartbreaking.
It is.
And when we went and made the death notification to I guess the mom and dad were separated, or they were not together.
Yeah,
to
the dad.
Yeah, and we went and made the notification to the dad, who was at work, and it didn't hit him like it hit the mom. And there's just something about a mom when it happens. And so I remember we just went on there. We went, okay, we got to continue the day. And so my field trainer kept looking at me. And I would be getting on the radio, whatever. And he said, I heard he makes a phone call, and he says, hey, to the supervisor, the lead supervisor, and he says, hey, he needs to go home for the day and all this different stuff. Because I had littles. My kids were pretty little. And they said, hey, we're going to let you go home. I'm like, am I in trouble? No, it has nothing to do with that. You haven't done anything wrong. Just you need to go home. You need to take some time. Okay, so I go home, and I remember first thing I did is I went, because my kids had just gotten out of school and they were with their mom, and so I went over there and I just held my own children. Yep. And that was the most important thing I could have done, is hold my own children, because you see the loss that somebody else has. To take that and say, you know, I am grateful. As Susie said last episode, I am so grateful for what I have. And so hold on to that. And Absolutely. So I held my kids, and then the officer who called for the detective and the supervisor on that call, he called me later that night. He and I had a good 45-minute chat on the phone. Just, you doing okay? And this is, because he was a veteran, you know, he'd been doing it for years, but it's still one of those things. And he and I actually had a conversation about this just a couple months ago. We were sitting down, we talked about that, and we rehashed it, and it's good just to get that off your chest.
Right.
You know?
The very first SIDS death I ever went to, and it was at the hospital. The detective at the time was at the hospital, and it was like, again, I was a brand new chaplain, but I was at the hospital. All of a sudden I looked around, and the detective was gone. And do you know where he was?
Where?
He was home holding his child who was the same age.
Yeah. Because bottom line is, these heroes who are out doing the work that nobody else is going to do, they're humans too. Yeah. They bleed and they breathe and they do all these things, and they have children, and they see all these horrible things, and that people aren't meant to, like you said, you're not meant to see that stuff.
No, you're not.
And the evil in the world that comes out when there's people that don't do anything is amazing. Yeah. So that's why there has to be people that do this stuff.
I have always said, I wish that the people who really don't know could be on the inside, be a little mouse, listening to the concern and care of police officers about people that they've helped and how they're doing. And if they could just see a police officer's job or a firefighter from our point of view, from inside.
Right.
Because one of the things that impressed me about our department was how much the guys really cared. Everybody is about really trying to make the society a better place. Everybody's trying to help people. I've seen police officers take abuse and just respond professionally, but it's just amazing. And then, you know, when you come to a police shooting, no police officer, I mean, they just feel terrible. And, you know, even, it's just a terrible thing. Yeah. And they don't want to do it. And so it's, again, one of the things that has been hard for me in the beginning was you always feel like you have to say something.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't. Yeah. Sometimes you're just there, you put an arm around somebody, and you just say, I'm here for you, I love you. My brother-in-law, the pastor in Texas, if he taught me anything that was really valuable, and that was it. He just had a way of walking into a situation that was really volatile or was experiencing grief and just had a way of walking in, putting his arm around people, saying, "We're going to be okay." Right. And I remember, in fact, he's on the force today. He was with another agency, and I had gone because I was called out. So I was with him, and it was during a police shooting. And so later on, I was riding with him in the car with this new agency, and he said, "Was that you?" And I said, "Yeah, it was." He said, "Well, thank you for being there." Well, I remember leaving thinking I did absolutely nothing.
Right.
I didn't. There's nothing to do. I wasn't able to say anything. Pastors think, well, we got to say something.
Right.
And sometimes that's the worst thing you can do.
Yeah, but just being there and put your hand on their shoulder and being there for them, or holding their hand or whatever.
Yeah.
I remember one of the death notifications that we had to go do. You went with me, and one of our detectives went, and it was a young man who had gotten hit by a drunk driver, and he got thrown from the vehicle, and it was so horrible because I had just talked to him maybe a half hour before, just down the street, and I talked to him. They were walking in the middle of the street, he and his buddy, and I said, "Hey, don't do that. Be cool." And they were jokey. They were drunk, but they were joking around. They were good kids. They early 20s, whatever.
Right.
And and they got it, and I said, "Hey, have a good day. See you later." They left. Half hour later, we're going to this call where he got hit by this car, and we had to go make the notification, and we went up to this house. And I don't know if you remember this, but we went up to the house. We found who his mom and dad were. They, middle of the night, 2 a.m, whatever it was. And we go to knock on the door. Mom comes out, dad comes out, and we talk to them, and they were just, beside themselves and the whole thing. And I myself and the detective, we had to go because now we had to go deal with the guy who had been driving, and he was now at the hospital because he got hit from his vehicle as well. Well, you turn out when we go and talk to, and I don't know whether you stayed. I think you stayed.
Yeah, I did.
And we left. We talked to the guy. We explained to him, "Hey, this is what happened." He was still so drunk that he didn't realize it, but we told him what had happened, and he was beside himself with grief. He said, "Don't tell me that. Don't tell me. I can't believe it." So that whole thing happens, and he went to prison, and he said, "I'm just going to take my lumps," and he didn't take a plea. He just said, "I did it." He owned up to his thing. And as bad as it was, and as hard as it is to deal with that, years later, I'm at church, and that mom and the dad, they go to our church, and I get to know them, and I didn't realize it. It was dark. I had a million things going on. I'm trying to, I'm trying to check boxes because I have a job to do and all this different stuff. I find out that these people go to our church, and they become some very good friends of ours, and they talk to me all the time about how, I remember when you came, and I was like, "Oh, that was you. I didn't realize it." And so they're actually close friends of my parents, and they're good folks. And the fact that we had gone there, and just that connection, that you see all this different stuff, and the healing that, I know they struggle, but they still understand that that the Lord does what he does for the reason that he has. So
that's the other thing we have to be careful of too. People, we learn what people say sometimes, trying to help soothe people, and it's the wrong thing. Well, praise God, you have other children. It's just the wrong thing to say.
Exactly.
It's really amazing some of the things people say. Mm-hmm. But getting back to that mother with a 14-month-old, I was teaching a class at the college for the chief.
Yeah.
And I told that story because I was explaining to these people who were there for the first responders class, they were interested in maybe pursuing it for a career. So I was telling the story, and all of a sudden it got quiet, and the gal right in front of me started crying. It was her. She was the mother.
Oh.
I felt so bad, and the chief dismissed the class, and so I just went over and said, she said, no, it's fine. She said, I'm glad you told her. I'm glad we're here together. And I just held both of her hands. I sat in a chair opposite her, and so she just told me how she was doing better, and so forth. And so that was unique, but it was good that we touched base. I have some people that I've gone to make death notifications for, and they still, how you doing? We still touch base with each other. We see each other in town. Yeah, it's and that makes it worthwhile.
Absolutely. Let me ask you a question, kind of changing gears just a little bit. We were talking a little bit ago about, these guys. The families worry about them, when they go to work and all this different stuff. And these guys are just are people in general. All these guys and girls, firefighters, police officers, whatever. They're humans. There's that narrative out there that police are one thing or another, or firefighters are. I don't know if the news says anything about firefighters. I haven't heard it, but for the most part, there's that thing that police are mean, or they're always out to get people or whatever. Being close to those guys, but not necessarily being one of them. I'm assuming you don't see this, or do you?
I would tell you this. So I've thought about this. I have been a chaplain for almost 24 years. I have never, and I've been associated with county fire, but we're talking police now. I have never met. I've been around a couple of officers that got fired, but I have never met an officer. I know there probably are some, because they're the pastors like that, but I have never met, in my experience, I'm talking about my personal experience, I have never met an officer who was mean-spirited, who had an axe to grind, was looking to hurt somebody. In my experience, 24 years, I have never met one. Now, I know there are some, because that's human life, but I have never met one.
Right.
I've met some that maybe, I thought, well, I wonder why they did that. But I never met anybody. I've never been with an officer. I looked it up yesterday. Through 2007 or 8, I have been in police cars about 500 hours.
Wow.
And I've forgotten how many different guys I've been with. I looked down the list, and just a ton of guys, and a lot of them not serving, of course, now. But I just remember each one of them, and they wanted to help. They just they didn't have an attitude that said, well, let's go deal with this, lousy person. I'll be honest with you. I found myself getting jaded sometimes, thinking, oh, man. I went to my church one time. I said, I want you to pray for me.
Right.
I said, I'm getting to the place where I've seen so much stuff that I just point my finger at the television and say, bam, bam.
Right.
And and the Lord convicted me about that. He said, that's not how I am.
Yeah.
I'm not that way. You can't be that way. And if you're a chaplain, if you're a Christian, forget the chaplain. You can't think like that, because that's not the way the Lord thinks. But I have never, in my own personal experience, ever been with an officer who just had negative thoughts about the community.
Whether it's racist or whether it's just mean-spirited or anything.
I've never met a racist cop. I have, I just haven't. And so when I hear it on the news, I want to stand up and scream, because I'm saying, you have no clue. You have no idea.
Right.
These people, and everybody thinks that police officers are gun happy. Most of the police officers that I have, at least maybe half of the police officers that come onto a department, some of them have never fired a gun before.
Yeah. Yeah.
They and so it's not the image. It's too bad. Like I say, sometimes I wished people could just come inside and just listen, and in the department, and just listen to the people how they talk, because I'm talking about whether it's together in shop or in a police car on a scene. I have just never seen it.
Yeah.
And so, and that's an honest. I'm not just being biased because I'm a chaplain. That's the honest truth.
Right.
I have known a couple to be fired because of some things they did, but it wasn't meanness or racism that got them fired.
Yeah. So you were talking about after there's, let's say there's a death or a, major incident, shooting or anything like that. There's always a little thing that happens after that, and we call it a critical incident debrief.
Right.
And you have headed up multiples of those, right?
I've been a part of multiples of those. In fact, I just went to one in Oregon last week, and for a shooting that took place. So I've been part of the team. I've been on a critical incident team in this area here for over 20 years, and I've been part of a state team for 12 years probably.
Yeah.
So I have been on a lot, and this year in particular, we've been on. It's just
multiples.
Huh? Yeah.
So what is that? What is a critical incident debrief for people that don't understand what that is, and what is the benefit of that?
The emphasis or the goal of that meeting is it's not, first of all, it's not a debriefing that has to do with what took place. It's not I'm trying to think. It's not
a tactical
debrief.
debrief.
Yeah, it's not, and it's not therapy. Sometimes police officers are a little hesitant about going because they think it's therapy. It's not.
Right.
So what we do is we meet together, and the team introduces himself, and then we go through this process. The goal of the process is to bring things, get people talking, and they lay out the facts. And a lot of times, and what they do is they try to put let's say there was a shooting, and what they try to do is they put all the facts, starting with dispatch, put it together kind of like a video, so that everybody, okay, that's why they did that.
Chronologically.
Chronological.
Yeah.
So, and the goal, of course, is so that when they leave there, they realize they're not the only ones that feel that way. They're not weird because, wow, this really...
They're losing sleep. This person's losing sleep. Nobody else is doing it.
And so we go through, there's a teaching aspect of this, too, where we look at the reactions. Are you losing sleep? Are you irritable? Are you quiet? Are you, when you're not normally quiet? Are you loud when you're not normally... you just go through this, and there's a ton of things, cognitive, emotional, all kinds of reactions that we have when we have been in a traumatic scene. We don't know it. It's all the body, all the adrenaline and everything that's just, it's not really even the mind so much as the body. And so we're going to encourage them to, eat well and exercise and so forth. But the way it works is you deal with facts, and then you deal with, after you've come off of autopilot, what was your first thought? What was something that just hit you, and so what you're doing is you're taking them, and you're getting, and they're talking. They don't have to, and it's not mandatory that they're there. So that's the one thing. But they're talking because they volunteer to talk, and we tell them you don't have to talk, but what you say may help somebody else. Well, what we're doing is normalizing an abnormal thing that happened.
Right. Yeah.
This is common. This is what you dealt with was uncommon, an incident that just don't see very often. Your reaction to it is very common.
Right.
So what we're trying to do is normalize their feelings and the angst that they might have, as far as they think everybody else is doing all right and I'm not doing too good. That's not true,
right.
Because it affects everybody. And what affects you on one case may not affect somebody else on
right.
another case.
Right.
It's just there are triggers, and sometimes it has to do with family, sometimes. But so the purpose of critical incident debrief is so that people walk away saying, okay, I haven't been getting some sleep, but that's normal. I've been off my feet a little bit, but okay. And if I don't see myself getting better, I can call this person, and this person, and get some more help.
Right.
But what it does eventually is it just shows everybody that we're human beings, and we all respond the same. I mean,
right.
And so, what if, like I said, what affects one person might not affect another person. I have seen a situation where a medic ran out of a house on Christmas, not because of what was happening in the house, but what had happened in November in another situation.
Yeah, he just hadn't dealt with it, and now it's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if, they just, and so that's the cumulative effect of things, and that's what we're trying to prevent.
Right.
Talk about it, get it out in the open, realize what you're feeling, what you're going through. That's normal. There's help. You're not the only one, and so that 20 years, 25 years into it, we're not.
You're still healthy enough that you can go do.
Yeah. What we don't talk about is
yeah.
police officer suicide. It's horrendous. We talk about an average of an officer killed every 51 hours or whatever in the line of duty. We don't talk about suicides that are probably 350 a year.
Jeez.
And,
that's almost one a day if you think about it.
Yeah.
So so if you see someone off their norm, especially a police officer or whatever, you need to make sure that you're coming alongside them, because not just you as a chaplain, but
police officers,
another police officer or somebody,
or another firefighter,
family member.
And then what happens? And they really, it's just devastating when a person said, "I saw it, and I should have said something, and I didn't."
Right. That grief that you have because of something you could have done, that you think, oh man, I could have done. Like, I mean, even somebody that passes away, and you go back to that part where you're like, man, if I'd have just gone and talked to them, or I'd have been able to see them one more time or something like that, and you tell yourself, I'll do it tomorrow, and there just happens to be no tomorrow for them. How much are you kicking yourself?
Yeah.
So take an opportunity to go do something right now.
I remember one training we had where a police officer in a city had been in a fierce firefight. I can't explain it, because it was one of a kind.
Yeah.
But and he's a cop's cop, but he said afterward, I was so shaken, he said, I couldn't even unload my gun. He said I couldn't 3 days later. And he said what I needed was somebody to just not to come and, because the department said, okay, go check him out. It's somebody just to come alongside, said, let's go get a cup of coffee, and ask me, how do you feel?
Right.
He said, and of course he'd gotten help, and so later on, but he was looking back, and he said, that's what we need. We need to be visual, we need to be vigilant, we need to be looking, and if you see somebody that you know pretty well and they don't seem normal, boy, it's time to ask them.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah.
You all right?
Take it personally, because if we have done what we talked about, where we've developed relationships,
right,
we're going to know that, and we're going to take that person personally.
That's
because
why it's
they're ours. Yeah. They're our friend. They're our family.
And that's why it's important, because, chaplains are not sworn officers. We're not police officers, but that's why it's so important to be available and to be visible, and to make contact with officers so that they'll know that, okay, here's somebody I can reach out to, and they won't distrust them.
Right.
They will know that, hey, they're for us.
Yeah. And that's the hopes, is that what we do, we're supposed to develop relationships. And I mentioned this on multiple podcasts and so far, and that is that pebble that drops in the pond, all the ripples that it makes.
Right.
Where are those ripples going? And what is the little thing that you do is what's the difference that's
Yeah.
going to make in the big grand scheme, the big picture.
Right.
So consider what you do and all that stuff. So that's fantastic. So I know you've got a lot of stories we can tell, but we can sit here all day.
Yeah.
And, I'm supposed I would have supposed that people that are listening, they don't have necessarily all day and as much as we'd want to. So, who knows? And I've said this before. There's open invitations. Maybe I'll call you back sometime and we can do it again, or maybe get you and a couple other chaplains in. We can do a round table.
Yeah, that'd be good.
That'd be kind of fun. And but the idea that there are people out there that want the best for others for no other reason than they want the best for others.
That's it.
That's what police officers do. That firefighters do. That's what all these heroes do. And you said, well, I'm not a hero. And I remember talking to you. Actually, it was yesterday, I think. And you said, well, I listened to some of the other guys on some of those podcasts, and I don't have anything they have. And well, they said the same thing. They said, I don't have anything to offer. That's just it. Is everybody has something to offer, and everybody has a story to tell. And everybody, if you're a hero, great. And in your case, you're a hero's hero sometimes, to where they have nothing else, and they just need to get rid of this stuff that's just weighing on their chest and on their shoulders, and they need to get it out there. And you're there to listen, and maybe, and if they ask you, then you'd be like, oh yeah, well, this is something that's worked before. You're not telling them you need to go do this and you need to go, there's none of that. And that's fantastic. And I would assume, being that you're part of a, what was that organization?
ICPC. We're not a part of it anymore.
But it's a large group of multiple chaplains, right?
Yeah.
And I would assume they have them all over the country.
Yeah.
So there's multiple departments, whether it's fire or police or wherever,
absolutely,
that they have these chaplains who just go in and they help somebody by just talking or being there as a sounding board. And, I know the military has them. They have chaplains in there, and they're specific to denomination of whatever you believe. But at the same time, there's people that want to listen and they want to be there and they want to hear your stories. So, I think that's absolutely commendable. And like I said, we can bring you back and go a little bit deeper. And
it has been,
if need be.
Yeah, it has been my joy, really, to do this. I just am around the best people in the world. And
let me ask you a question on this one. How big is the paycheck for this?
Well, there's no paycheck.
Oh, wait a minute. So you do this all, or you get called out at 2:00 in the morning, or you do whatever. You got to go sit there and listen to a wailing mother and go through all this pain and suffering for hours on end sometimes for $0.
Right. Now, there are some chaplains that are paid, and they've raised money to be full-time, and that's fine. But that's not my main calling, was being a pastor.
Right.
And the truth is, most departments can't afford to pay a chaplain. So all of our chaplains, except for one, but even then, he's not getting paid near what he's worth. So and it's not coming from the department; it's coming from a variety of agencies, a little bit here and a little bit there, and other people. But most of the chaplains that I know are all volunteer.
Wow.
And so. Yeah, it's
that's fantastic. That's you say, oh well, you must get paid well because you're just there and you're saying all this stuff pro cop and blah 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 because you get paid well.
So when I went to, that was on my dime.
Yeah.
So that's my gas. I spent the night there. My daughter and wife didn't want me driving back in the night.
Yeah.
And but when I left, I thought, man, I'm glad I was here.
Yeah.
Because
you know what, and I'll bet you those guys were glad that you were there, whether they admit it right now or not. In the long run, they're gonna be like, "Well, I'm glad somebody was there."
Actually, what they said was, "We never knew there was something like this. Thanks for coming."
Yeah, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
So, Steve, I want to thank you so much for coming, chit chatting with us, and I've enjoyed it absolutely.
Thank you so much.
And I know you were a little nervous getting in. You're like, I don't know. And that's what everybody says, but it's actually a lot funner and easier than you'd think it is, just getting in here and telling it's almost it's almost a testimony, if nothing else. You're coming to tell your story, and maybe you can encourage others, and people want to hear it. So thank you very much. So if, like I said before, starting out, if you want to get in touch with us or whatever, you can get a hold of us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram, Facebook. You can get a hold of us there. Chime in on the post that I put up in regards to each episode, and I will be answering those. It's not like I've got somebody monitoring my social media or anything like that. It's actually what you see on the What's a Hero podcast is me answering those questions. So I'd be happy to talk with you. Let me know where you're from, and that's cool. The other side of it is, we always have to consider those people who are serving us and that are our heroes, that just stay nameless. They stay faceless, but they wake up every day putting other people first. And that's our police officers, our firefighters, those nurses, our doctors, our teachers, and our military vets, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard. You guys that wake up and selflessly put yourself on the line for other people makes the world of difference for everybody. And those same people need help too. So there's people for them as well. Because what else are we supposed to do but develop those relationships and be there for one another? So I want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart. And we will be talking with you next time. So for Pastor Chaplain Steve Berman, and I've been Ken Frownfelter, and this has been the What's a Hero podcast. We are clear.